On May 12, 2026, Riordan dropped an announcement that pretty much shook the entire fandom. He announced a whole new series set in the Riordanverse, and it's simply called Camp Hapled, as it talks about demigods from camp and their respective stories. It's a 4-book series going to come out in the next few years, and its first book is called Camp Hapled: The Wild Zone, and it's set to come out this year on September 29, 2026. In this video, I'll be going through everything we know about this book series, and I'll also try my best to neatly add this in the overall Riordanverse Timeline. A while back, I already made a pretty big Riordanverse Timeline video to explain how to read the books, but with Rick adding this whole new series, I realized that it's about time that I updated that video with this one to fully explain how to read the Riordanverse now with the new books coming out this year and the next few years. So with all of that said, let's jump into it. First, let's talk about this new series and what we can expect. In his website, Rick went on a great deal about this book and even wrote a whole funny dialogue he supposedly had with his original main character of the Riordanverse, or Percy Jackson himself. One thing clear about this new series though is that Percy is not going to appear in these books at all. In fact, even characters like Annabeth Chase and Grover Underwood are not going to appear in this new series, because this series will focus on a whole new cast of demigods. As mentioned, there will be 4 books in the series, and each book focuses on one demigod, so let's go through it. The first book, The Wild Zone, follows Katie Kim. The next books don't have titles yet, but we do have the following demigods for each book. Book 2 will follow the story of Harper Rush, Book 3 will be in the point of view of Zuri Chapman, and Benny Garcia for Book 4. All of these books are written by Rick and another author, kind of like what he did with The Sun and the Star and The Core of the Dead with Marco Shiro. But this time, each book in this new series has a different author, which is insane to me, but let's go through the authors. For the first book, The Wild Zone, Rick will be writing with Korean-American author Annabelle Oh. According to Rick, Annabelle is a super talented author of middle grade and young adult books from South California. Researching further on her website states that she writes mystery novels, and her most notable book is called Maggie and the Story Shadows, which was published just last year. Moving on to the second book, Rick will be writing with Kyle Lukoff, an American writer. Kyle is a children's book author, school librarian, and a former bookseller. Rick introduced them as a pretty good author too, telling us that Kyle won a Stonewall Award for a middle grade fantasy adventure book called When Aiden Became a Brother. Other notable works from Kyle are the following: Too Bright to See, I'm Sorry You Got Mad, and Just What to Do. Rick continued about Kyle in his website, saying that Kyle's works have been about expanding transgender representation in children's literature, and because of this, he decided that Kyle was the perfect person to help him write the story of Harper Rush, a transgender demigod, which is pretty cool to see. As for Book 3, Rick will write with Jade Adia. Jade is an author and school teacher, and some of her notable works include the following: There Goes the Neighborhood, which won the John Steptoe New Talent Award, R Shouts Echo, and Batgirl Possession DC Superheroes. As for the last book, or Book 4, Rick will be writing with Pablo Cartaya, a Cuban-American New York Times bestselling author who was awarded a Pura Belper honor along with many other accolades. Some of his most notable work include the following: The Epic Fail of Arturo Zamora, Curveball, and A Hero's Guide to Summer Vacation. So at this point, let's get into the plot of each book. As of now, we mainly have details for the first book called The Wild Zone, so I'll be covering it in greater detail compared to the brief descriptions we got from the other books. So with that, let's get into what we know about The Wild Zone. To fully understand its plot, let's get into its brief synopsis, and it reads as follows. Katie Kim may be a newcomer to Camp Hapled, but even she knows they weren't supposed to be running through the Wild Zone. The forest is off limits to campers and staff. Why then did Clarice, head counselor of the Aries cabin, take her and 4 other newbies there in the dark of night and tell them to race back to camp by morning? Clarice's threat was scary enough, but when Katie's half-brother Grant goes missing, his disappearance sparks the arrival of vicious monsters and a mysterious curse. It's up to Katie and the 3 remaining newbies, the Wild Armada, to brave the Wild Zone again and uncover its dark and deadly secrets. In Rick's website, we also learn that Katie is Korean American, just like his co-author Annabelle Oh, and Katie is a demigod daughter of Aries. What makes Katie pretty interesting is that she was said to have a very dangerous secret, and it might be related to what's happening in the Wild Zone. Speaking of the Wild Zone, I think it's also important to note that there was no mention of this place in Camp Haplid before until now. The synopsis and Rick's website both point to the idea that the Wild Zone is somewhere in the woods at camp. And looking back at previous books, we know that the woods were a pretty dense and possibly dangerous part of camp, probably because there's just so much things going on there. Many creatures live in the woods, including a bunch of nature spirits like dryads, nymphs, satyrs, and even giant ant creatures called merkmies, as seen in the first book of the Trials of Apollo or the Hidden Oracle. Aside from this, the forest also somehow houses the ancient grove of the Dona, which was planted by the Titaness Rhea in the first days of the universe, and this place is the most ancient source of prophecies, but this grove was unfortunately destroyed in the Hidden Oracle. The forest was also where Festus the Bronze Dragon was lost when it ran away from the Hephaestus kids, and this same place is also where Luke attempted to kill Percy in the Lightning Thief after Luke revealed his betrayal. With all of these, it's clear that the woods and camp have a pretty complex history, so seeing Rick add even more lore to this mysterious place is honestly pretty cool. What's even interesting about the synopsis is that it mentions Clarice LaRue, or the demigod daughter of Ares we know very well in the PJO books. But what's crazy is that Clarice never mentioned or talked about any of these demigods, so I guess you have to wait and see for why that's the case. Moving further from the plot, we also had to talk about the book cover of the Wild Zone, because it does reveal some of the characters we'll get to meet in the books. First off, we have this girl in the middle who's holding a knife, and she has black hair. If you look a bit closely at her, she's actually wearing a necklace, and at first I thought this might be a Camp Haplid bead necklace, because all campers get these, with each bead symbolizing how many summers a demigod spent in camp. However, there are no beads in this necklace, so this might be just her personal necklace. I also have a feeling that this girl is Katie Kim, because she's in the middle and she's the main character of this specific book. The kids behind her must be the other main characters for future books, and here's my current hypothesis on which person is which. This girl with the bow and arrow over here must be Zuri Chapman, because Zuri was said to be a demigod daughter of Apollo, and Apollo was also known as the god of archery. The two people to the left must be both Harper Rush and Benny Garcia. I don't know who is who though, but either way, they're definitely Harper and Benny. Together, the four of them are inside the woods of camp, which is where the Wild Zone is. And if you look even closer, there seems to be a beast hiding in the trees, which may be one of the monsters in the mentioned monster attacks in the synopsis. From this book, let's briefly go to what we know of the other books, because Rick also gave us some pretty quick descriptions on the other demigods. For book 2, we follow Harper Rush, a demigod child of Aphrodite, who, in Rick's words, arrives at camp and finds that for the first time in his life, he can't count on charm speed to get him out of trouble. And then, he and the other 3 demigods get into serious trouble. And on top of all of that, his mom arrives, whom he's never met. Moving forward, book 3 follows the perspective of Zuri Chapman, a demigod daughter of Apollo, who comes to camp with a massive chip on her shoulder and a desire for revenge against a particular monster that ruined her life. And lastly, book 4 has Benny Garcia, who unlike the rest of the characters, is an unclaimed demigod. And according to Rick, Benny's godly parent is going to be a huge shocker to all readers, which is why he didn't reveal it in this post. And that's all we know so far about this new series. And although all of these books sound pretty cool right now, it also begs the question of, how does this fit in the current Riordanverse timeline? I mean, I went through it in that one video, and that was honestly pretty insane to make. But at the same time, it gave me a good basis on what we have right now. So get ready, because we're going to go through the entire Riordanverse timeline, book and short story wise, just to understand what we have and how to read it today in 2026. Just to be clear, I'll start with the chronological order before we get into how to read the books, because they're kind of different. So first, the chronological order of the books. To properly understand the Riordanverse, we have to list the 5 main book series again. Percy Jackson and the Olympian series, or often known as PJO, which is a 5-book series centered on, you guessed it, Percy Jackson's adventures. The PJO books include the following: The Lightning Thief, The Sea of Monsters, The Titan's Curse, The Battle of the Labyrinth, and The Last Olympian. The Heroes of Olympus series, meanwhile, is a 5-book series that centers on 7 demigods who fight against the Earth goddess Gaia, and this chronologically comes after the PJO series. The Heroes of Olympus books include the following: The Lost Hero, The Son of Neptune, The Mark of Athena, The House of Hades, and The Blood of Olympus. Moving on, we have the Trials of Apollo series. another 5-book series that centers on the adventures of the god of prophecies Apollo, who is turned into a mortal teenager named Lester Papadopoulos, and he has to go through trials to gain his godhood back. Its books are the following: The Hidden Oracle, The Dark Prophecy, The Burning Maze, The Tyrant's Tomb, and The Tower of Nero. PJO, Heroes of Olympus, and The Trials of Apollo are also known as the Camp Half-Blood series or chronicles because they concern Greek and Roman mythology and often circulate around characters who are from Camp Half-Blood. The other 2 remaining series may seem disconnected to the Camp Half-Blood chronicles, but they are still considered part of the main heart of the Riordanverse. These are the Kane Chronicles, or a 3-book Egyptian mythology-based series that follows the adventures of Carter and Sadie Kane, and the books are the following: The Red Pyramid, The Throne of Fire, and The Serpent's Shadow. And lastly, the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series, another 3-book series that focuses on Norse mythology and the story of Magnus Chase, and it has the following books: The Sword of Summer, The Hammer of Thor, and The Ship of the Dead. Now, from these books, Rick Riordan has been expanding stories over the years, and this new series is pretty much part of those stories. So at this point, let's get into the timeline and see the stories and books in chronological order. The first book that takes place chronologically in the Riordanverse is The Diary of Castellan, which is a short story and a companion book for PJO called The Demigod Diaries. The next book chronologically is The Lightning Thief, or the first book of the PJO series. And after this is when things get a bit complicated. In my previous timeline video, I explained how after The Lightning Thief, it would automatically continue to the second book of PJO, or The Sea of Monsters, but believe it or not, this new Camp Half-Blood series actually takes place in the autumn between The Lightning Thief and The Sea of Monsters. This means that somehow, 4 books took place after The Lightning Thief. So this is how it would look like. After The Lightning Thief, we have The Wild Zone, and then the second book, its third book, and lastly, its 4th book. And then we can approach the timeline kind of normally, because next we had The Sea of Monsters, and then The Titan's Curse. After this, we had to pause for a bit because of a Heroes of Olympus companion book called The Demigod Files. Like the Demigod Diaries, the Demigod Files contain short stories, and one short story from this book takes place after The Titan's Curse, which is Percy Jackson and the Stolen Chariot. After this is the 4th book of PJO, or The Battle of the Labyrinth, and then we head to a short story from the Demigod Files called Percy Jackson and the Sword of Hades. After this, believe it or not, we'll head to a completely new series through the first book of the King Chronicles, or The Red Pyramid. Then it will go to the Throne of Fire, or the next King Chronicles book, before we can finally head to the last Olympian. So at this point, let's pause first and get a recap for this first part. Chronologically, this is the sequence: The Demigod Diaries, The Diary of Castellan, The Lightning Thief, Camp Half-Blood The Wild Zone, Camp Half-Blood Book 2, Camp Half-Blood Book 3, Camp Half-Blood Book 4, The Sea of Monsters, The Titan's Curse, The Demigod Diaries, Percy Jackson and the Stolen Chariot. After this is the 4th book of PJO, or The Battle of the Labyrinth. And then we head to a short story from the Demigod Files called Percy Jackson and the Sword of Hades. And then The Red Pyramid, The Throne of Fire, and The Last Olympian. And now we're at the timeline for the events after The Last Olympian. After The Last Olympian, we continue with another short story called The Demigod Diaries, The Staff of Hermes, and then the last book of the King Chronicles, or The Serpent's Shadow. From this, we can finally start the Heroes of Olympus series with The Lost Hero, but we had to pause a bit here because we have another short story from the Demigod Diaries called Leo Valdez and the Quest for Buford. And then we can continue normally with the Heroes of Olympus books through the following: The Son of Neptune, The Mark of Athena, The House of Hades, and then The Blood of Olympus. After The Blood of Olympus, a lot of things happen, and let's go through it. First, we had the Demigods and Magicians side stories, which is basically a King Chronicles crossover with PJO, and there are 3 books: The Son of Sebek, The Staff of Seraphis, and The Crown of Ptolemy. After this brief trilogy, we can head to another new trilogy Rick started in 2024, which is also known as the Senior Year Adventures Trilogy. These books take place roughly after The Blood of Olympus, and they have the following books: The Chalice of Gods, The Wrath of the Triple Goddess, and a currently unnamed 3rd book that is set to come out around 2027 or 2028. Now at this point, let's get a huge recap of this section of the Riordanverse. For the timeline after The Last Olympian, we have the following: The Demigod Diaries, The Staff of Hermes, and then the last book of the King Chronicles, or The Serpent's Shadow. The Lost Hero, The Demigod Diaries, Leo Valdez and the Quest for Buford, the Son of Neptune, the Mark of Athena, the House of Hades, and the Blood of Olympus. After the Blood of Olympus are 2 book series, the King Chronicles and Percy Jackson crossover books, which are the Son of Sebek, the Staff of Seraphis, and the Crown of Ptolemy. After this, we have the new senior year adventure books, which are the Chalice of Gods, the Wrath of the Triple Goddess, and an unnamed 3rd book. And now, let's head to the next section, the Trials of Apollo series and the Magnus Chase trilogy. Believe it or not, but the Trials of Apollo's first book, or the Hidden Oracle, takes place at the same time as Magnus Chase's first book, or the Sword of Summer. This would continue with the Trials of Apollo's second book, or the Dark Prophecy, and Magnus Chase's second book, the Hammer of Thor. After this, we leave Magnus Chase for a bit because the Burning Maze and the Tyrant's Tomb happen next. Once these 2 books are done, Magnus Chase and the Trials of Apollo connect again with the Trials of Apollo's last book, or the Tower of Nero, and Magnus Chase's last book, the Ship of the Dead. After these, we'll head to another new series with the Nico D'Angelo and Will Solis books. There are 2 books here, The Sun and the Star and The Court of the Dead. As of now, the most recent book of the Riordanverse timeline-wise is either The Court of the Dead or this short Italian story, which in English is called A Half-Blood Christmas. This tells the story of Percy shopping for a gift for Annabeth with Nico during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it isn't really as well known, but it is technically a part of the Riordanverse canon, which is why I decided to add it here. Now, given all of these books, let's head to how to read them in 2026. Comparing this to my old video, what I'm about to share is still pretty similar, but I'm also taking into account the new books that are soon to be released and have been released last year. So this is how I'd read them if I were about to start the Riordanverse today. Start with reading all of the Percy Jackson and the Olympian books, and I mean from the Lightning Thief to the Last Olympian. Don't consider the newest Camp Half-Blood books just yet, because they're not here as of the moment. After PJO, go to the King Chronicles trilogy before heading to the Heroes of Olympus books. Once you're done with the Heroes of Olympus, you can read the Demigods and Magicians side stories, or proceed with the Senior Year Adventure series. Personally, I would go to the Demigods and Magicians books because I want to see stories of Carter and Sadie with Percy and Annabeth, so I would go for it after the Heroes of Olympus. But if you're not too interested in that, it's also okay to proceed with the Senior Year Adventure books, with the Chalice of Gods and the Wrath of the Triple Goddess. Once you're done with the Wrath of the Triple Goddess, you have to choose between Magnus Chase and the Trials of Apollo. Like I mentioned in my old video, I would go with Magnus Chase because it's just 3 books, and once you're done with that, you can head to the Trials of Apollo series. Once you're done with all of that, I would recommend reading the Nico and Will books. These books take place after the events about the Tower of Nero and the Ship of the Dead, so I think it's perfect to read them timeline-wise as well. Once you're done with everything, you can now read the many side books to the Riordanverse while waiting for the new Camp Half-Blood series. Based on my experience, there doesn't need to be an order when reading any of the side books, because by this point, you already have a good foundation on the characters that appear in these books, and you can treat these stories as additional fun adventures. There are many side books that you could read, and I'm going to try my best to list them all. If you're interested in reading stories related to the Heroes of Olympus and PJO, you can read the following books: The Demigod Diaries, The Demigod Files, Percy Jackson's Greek Heroes, Percy Jackson's Greek Gods, Camp Half-Blood Confidential, Camp Jupiter Classified, A Probation's Journal, and Percy Jackson and the Singer of Apollo. As for Magnus Chase, you can read 2 additional books: Hotel Valhalla, Guide to the Norse Worlds, and 9 from the 9 Worlds. As for the King Chronicles, you can read the Demigods and Magicians stories if you didn't read them after the Heroes of Olympus, or you can head to 2 other books, like the King Chronicles Survival Guide and Brooklyn House Magician's Manual. From all of this, there's only 2 other side books that you could read: The Cursed Carnival and Other Calamities, New Stories About Mythic Heroes, which is basically a book that Rick co-authored with a bunch of other writers from Rick Riordan Presents, and it's not necessarily too related to the Riordanverse, but they're actually pretty entertaining if you want more stories. And lastly, you could read the Italian story A Half-Blood Christmas, which somehow takes place during the COVID-19 pandemic. And overall, that's how you can read the Riordanverse. I didn't include some of these side books to the timeline because they don't really fit as neatly compared to the other books, and they really made as extra stories for readers to enjoy once they're done with the main books. But ultimately, that's the Riordanverse right now. Rick may publish more and more books in the future, but as of now, this is how the timeline is looking for us readers with the announcement of the new book series. So how about you? What do you think of these upcoming Camp Half-Blood books? Let me know in the comments down below.